Hey everybody, today we're going to go over the ultimate French press recipe. Now we love French press, we also love pour overs. Pour over gives you a really light, crisp mouthfeel. Absolutely love that in the mornings, but every once in a while I feel like I want something a little earthier, a little heavier mouthfeel. Now the biggest misconception is that French press is a darker or a stronger cup, and that's just not true. A lot of people will use a coarse grind, more coffee to water ratio to make it darker and it's stronger. It's really not that it's stronger, it's just that when you do a pour over or any kind of brewing method that uses a paper, that will filter out some of the oils. And so it makes it a little crisper, a little cleaner when you can filter out some of the sediment and the silt and the oils. Gives you a crisper, cleaner cup in terms of mouthfeel. French press sometimes can be a little silty and sludgy because you're not filtering out a lot of the sediment and the particles. And so I did some research, spent a lot of time, trial and error. Kristen and I drank a lot of coffee. We already do, but even more so trying to test this recipe. And this is the ultimate French press recipe. Now there's a few divergences from the traditional method of making French press coffee, and we're going to cover some of them today. So first thing, let's just talk about water real quick. Water, essential that it is filtered water. You can use distilled. I know some people, if you go on YouTube, you'll see people using a distilled water. I don't think it's necessary. I don't know that exactly that's all that healthy anyway to drink just distilled water, but make sure that it's filtered water. If you have one on your refrigerator, a filter on your refrigerator, you can use that. You can use bottled water, but make sure it's clean, crisp, clear, filtered, cold water. As far as the ratio that we're going to use, the ratio that I found that works the best, and you can adjust it a little bit, is 500 mils of water to 30 grams of coffee. So that's 30 grams and 500 grams. That's for 2 cups. If you're doing a 1 cup, it's 15 grams of grind to 250 mils or 250 grams of water. And I'm going to show you that now. If you want a stronger cup, I don't suggest that you increase the ratio and use more coffee. You're better off letting it brew 2 minutes longer versus adding 2 more grams of coffee. Try it first by letting it brew a little longer when you use this method before changing up the ratios. So let's talk about the beans. You got to use fresh, roasted, freshly ground coffee. Don't use coffee grounds that have been sitting around for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days. You can, if they're in a pressure canister like this, you can keep your beans in this canister. It's pressurized. You can also have your grinds in this canister, but not for more than maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days in terms of ground coffee. The beans can stay in this pressurized environment for 1 to 2 months, but the grind, after 3, 4, 5 days, it releases a lot of gases and enzymes, and it's just not going to be delicious coffee. So you want to make sure your coffee is fresh roasted and you grind it fresh. Now the grind setting, this is the first divergence from the traditional method. The grind setting that you see I have on here is right at the middle. It's kind of a medium grind. In fact, I would even drop it to maybe just shy of medium. And what you're going to end up with is not that kosher salt texture. Here you can see, if I show you right here, see this texture? This is about what I'm looking for. It's not quite kosher salt. If I showed you the comparison to kosher salt, it would look something like this. You see, so that's probably what you're used to when you do a French press. And you want it more medium, actually medium, a little bit to medium fine is going to be okay with this recipe. All right, so I got my coffee grinds, I've got my fresh water, and I'm going to take it right to the boil. 212 is fine. By the time you take it off or you stop it at 212 and then you start preparing a couple of your other things for about a minute or two, it drops down to about 210 off the boil. 210 is perfectly fine. If you find that your coffee is a little on the bitter side, and that's whether you use this method of brewing or any other method of brewing, if you find a little bit of bitterness that's just a little over I mean, because bitter is good, right? We love bittersweet chocolate. You know, chocolate is bitter, but we like it because it's balanced. If you find that your coffee is balanced and you like the flavor of it, but you're just finding it a little harsh on the bitter side, when you brew, take the temperature down. So like on a very dark roast, you might want to go to, say, 200 degrees. Set your kettle at 205. When you take it off the boil, it'll be about 200 when you pour. This is right off the boil. This is going to be 212 and then 210, you know, as I get everything ready here. So I'm going to use this old kind of traditional style French press. And the only reason why I'm doing that and not in the one that I prefer, which is the Stag one. This one is the best. It has thermal insulation. It's sturdier. I don't have to worry about breaking the glass or anything. This is perfect. But I wanted to be able to show you kind of what goes on inside, so I'm using it clear. One other thing that you must have is a digital scale. I use the Acaia scale, the Pearl. I think it's the best. You put your brewer on top, turn it on, it automatically it automatically tears it. If you want to hit T, it will tear it. And then in goes the coffee. So I'm just going to dump the coffee right in, and I'm going to get right up to 30 grams. If I'm a little over, I can be a little over. There we go. 30 grams. All right. I don't need to settle the bed. I don't need to do anything. I'm going to just dump the coffee right in. So I'm going to tear it to 0. And now I've got my water right off the boil. It's probably about 210, 208, 209, 210, which is fine. And I'm going to pour this. Now that I have 30 grams, I'm going to pour it right up to 500. .503. Perfect. Now, the next thing you're going to do is nothing. So here's the second divergence from the traditional. You're not going to stir it. You're not going to swirl it. You're not going to do anything. You're literally going to leave it alone, set your timer, and wait 4 minutes. Now, there's no steeping. There's no bloom period because this is immersion. This is an immersion style of coffee making. Immersion means that the grinds stay immersed with water, and it'll stay in that immersion. It'll stay connected with the water, in contact with the water for a period of time, and then you filter it out into your cup. With a pour over, for instance, you're going to pour your water in, and it's going to immediately start dripping through. This does not drip through. This stays in contact. The water stays in contact with the grinds throughout the whole process. That's called immersion. So with immersion, you don't need to steep it. You don't need to pour a little bit first and to bloom the coffee. It's all in one here. So do absolutely nothing for 4 minutes. Don't touch it. Don't disturb it. And what's going on right now is not only is it brewing, steeping, blooming, doing all the things it needs to be doing, but the larger particles and even some of the finer particles are now starting to settle to the bottom. So as it's brewing, it's also settling. So don't disturb it. It's going to create a nice crust on the top. And then right at 4 minutes, we'll take it to the next stage. Okay, it's been 4 minutes, ready for the next and kind of the final stage. And another divergence from the traditions. Now, some will use a paddle because they think you shouldn't have metal in contact with your coffee, the coffee grinds. I don't need a paddle. What I use is 2 spoons, actually. So I'm going to do 3 things here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to break the crust gently, and I'm going to give it just a little bit of a stir. Okay, and then after I give it a little bit of a stir, I'm going to remove some of the floating bits and, you know, foam and things that are on the top. So first thing I'm going to do, kind of just break the crusts. It smells so good. Give it, you know, just a little gentle stir. Nothing more than that. And now you're going to see like a foam floating, kind of like when you make soup and they tell you to kind of skim the stuff off the top. So I'm just going to take 2 spoons because it's a little easier to do. And I'm going to scoop into this cup of water to make it easier. I'm just going to scoop up any of those larger bits that have floated to the top. Maybe one more. There we go. That's it. That's the second thing. So we break the crust. We give it a little bit of a stir. Then scoop up just a little bit of any of the sediment that maybe is floated to the top, any maybe dirt particles, anything that got caught in the foam raft that's floating on the top. Scoop that away. And now, as you can see, kind of shine the light through, you can see here the more particles floating to the bottom. And that's what we want to have happen. We want the rest of the coffee grinds to now gently settle. Now they've been stirred up a little bit, just gently settle to the bottom as it continues and finishes its brewing period. And the third thing to do here is nothing. This is also kind of a divergence of the traditional method. Like you stir, you wait a minute, and then you plunge. We're not doing any of that. Just let it sit. Let it sit and allow all of the silt and sludge and whatever else is floating around, let it just slowly settle gently to the bottom. And I would suggest 5 minutes minimum. The longer you let it sit, the better the coffee is going to taste. It's not going to become more bitter. It's just going to have more flavor. Like I said earlier, before you start increasing the amount of coffee to water to make it stronger, just let it brew another minute or two longer. 5 minutes is perfect. So 4-minute stage is the first part. Give it a little stir, scoop up any of the foam and bits off the top, and then let it sit for 5 minutes or 6 minutes or even 7 or 8 minutes. I've had it sit for 10 minutes. The coffee does not get cold. It's too hot to drink right now anyway. You wouldn't want to drink it. This has been sitting for 8 minutes, and this is too hot to drink. If you poured this on your skin, you'd pull your hand away. It's too hot. The cooler the temperature of coffee is, the closer the temperature of coffee is to your own body temperature, the better coffee tastes. You can taste more of the coffee. Right now, too hot to drink. Let it sit for 10 minutes if you like. This particular brew, I'm going to let it sit for 5 minutes after the 4-minute initial period. So total time here is going to be about 9 minutes. Maybe it took me 30 seconds to describe to you the scooping. So maybe 9.5 minutes. Don't do anything. Don't stir. Don't touch it. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, we are at exactly 9.5 minutes. I could go a little bit longer, but I won't. So this is the last part of it. Almost ready to drink. But usually what happens at this point with the traditional French press is the plunge, the hard press. And even when you go to a fancy restaurant and they bring you a French press, what's the first thing they do? They put it on the table and they plunge it down. What I found, we tested this and I saw this, the second that you put in this plunger with this filter on here and you plunge it down to the bottom of the grinds, this kind of beautiful, zen, relaxing coffee bed that you've now settled it all to the bottom, you're just gonna stir it up. Think about it. The moment that plunger presses into the liquid, it's going to cause this stirring effect, this flooding effect up that's going to stir up all of the fine grinds. Now, the filter, which is not really that much of a filter, it's like a little bit of a screen, like a metal sieve. It'll catch most of the large particles, but you end up with kind of like this sludge and silt kind of mouthfeel. And some people might like that like Turkish coffee, gritty. This method is you'll put the filter in, you'll put this little plunger in, but you're not going to plunge. You're going to push it right down to the water line, just to the top of the water. I'm not going to plunge into the liquid and have all that stuff go up. I'm literally just going to set it right at the water's edge, so to speak. Make sure the opening is there. And then I'm going to just gently pour my coffee. slowly. Now you can't see it from there, but this is sludge-free. It's got great clarity. It doesn't have as nearly the amount of sediment from upsetting the bed. It's been brewing for nearly 10 minutes. It's still very hot. See, this method, it has the clarity and crispness of a pour over, but it has the depth, the oils, that earthiness of a French press. This is the best of both worlds. It does take a little bit more time, takes a little bit more care, but I promise you, this will be the best French press coffee you've ever had.